I'll move on to Anna. Thank you for your patience. And then after Anna's intervention and Julia's reading of a comrade's letter from the Ukrainian front, we'll open the discussion. Let me bring up my notes. And now I'll revert to Italian. Hanna Perekhoda è una professoressa e ricercatrice ucraina, anche lei nativa di Donetsk, professoressa di storia all'Università di Losanna, con un focus sull'imperialismo e sul nazionalismo ucraino e russo. Scrive per testate europee, da Jacobin a Politis, e la sua è una delle voci, assieme ad Alexander, che all'inizio dell'operazione genocida israeliana ha denunciato il campismo neoliberale che difende l'Ucraina ma svaluta le vite palestinesi, in modo analogo al corrispettivo rosso-bruno che fa esattamente il contrario, ma con lo stesso metodo. È una delle fondatrici in Svizzera del Comitato di solidarietà per l'attivismo antiguerra ucraino e russo. È anche lei un membro dell'organizzazione socialista ucraina Sostani Ru e di multiple reti e organizzazioni di sinistra anti-autoritaria. Ci parlerà della necessità di difesa, del cosiddetto riarmo europeo e delle criticità, dei pericoli neoliberali che si porta appresso. Anna, thank you again. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks to organizers and thanks to your team. You are doing very important work. I mean, the work of practical solidarity, because without practical bottom-up solidarity, all the talks we do today wouldn't have any sense. So thank you for your work and for your dedication to pursue it. And also thanks to the audience for their interest, for their patience also. And I will try to be short and please make a sign if you see that I'm too long. So I think today it should be clear by now that the impunity of the aggressors like Russia, like Israel, and other countries on the international level, the impunity of the aggressors is directly fueling the rise of fascist forces in our countries, and vice versa. And the rise of these forces that are combining authoritarianism and libertarianism, economic libertarianism, it must be taken very seriously. We see the crackdown on migrants, the institutionalization of misogyny, of homophobia, the denial of climate change. We see also the acceptance and normalization of ruthless exploitation of both people and nature, the normalization of the idea of liquidation of Ukraine, of deportation of Palestinians, destruction of their homes and lives. And it seems like these are these pillars of this new order that Putin and Trump are trying to impose on the rest of the world. And also, maybe we will have time to talk about it later, but despite this very dark picture, let's be attentive to the fact that the resistance is also rising, and the resistance in Ukraine is continuing, but also you see how in recent days and weeks in many countries the resistance against authoritarianism and against the fascist forces is rising, and people are going in the streets, and we must support these movements as far as we can. But as we are in Europe, maybe I should focus on this question. So now I think it is very clear that for decades, European countries have underinvested in their security because they were relying and outsourcing their security to American military power, assuming that large-scale conflicts on the European continents, it's a thing of the past. But now this very strange security mechanism is crumbling, and the large-scale war is not just on the large-scale war on the European continent. It's not just the hypothetical possibility. It's already happening because it's devastating the biggest European country for more than 3 years. And I think in these circumstances, the question of defense and security can no longer be ignored. And I think we are truly facing as a humanity, but also as a European community, truly facing a defining moment. And deliberately ignoring this reality is simply impossible. I think the most dangerous approach to this problem, to the problem of security, would be to slash social spending to fund military institutions, and this is the solution that neoliberals are already proposing, namely to reduce budgets for healthcare, education, pensions, welfare. And of course, they don't put it in that way. They say instead, for example, like President Macron in France, that he wants to increase military spending without raising taxes. So basically, he's saying that I will cut in your social spending. So it is evident that weakening in such a way social safety of the society would actually deepen inequality and ultimately destabilize democracies from the inside. And at a time when far-right populism is on the rise in the most important European countries, on the rise or already partly in power, like in Italy, and on the rise like in Germany, on the rise like in France. So this solution of imposing austerity would actually strengthen these anti-democratic forces. And given that Russia and the US now, they openly support these forces, like openly, I mean, G.D. Vance doesn't hide in his intentions. Such a move is exactly what Trump and Putin are hoping for. They are hoping that European leaders will make a bad decision that will undermine their own legitimacy. And in fact, many of these European politicians who now speak of the very real need to strengthen the defense, these are the same people and the same political forces who paved the way for this crisis also. Because, of course, they rightly condemn abuses of power on the international stage, for example, by Russia, but they also tolerate or encourage Darwinian logic within their own societies. They are encouraging a system where the most powerful continue to dominate the most vulnerable. And this kind of inconsistency, of course, it undermines their legitimacy and creates a fertile ground for the rise of fascist movements who capitalize on these fractures. And of course, I think you know it itself that a society that feels abandoned and ignored by politicians, by its own political elites, do not want to support international commitments, even if these commitments are there to uphold some fundamental principles like defense of rights, defense of sovereignty, of international law, and populists, both right populists but also left populists, they exploit this discontent by fueling the idea that governments are sacrificing national wealth, national interests in favor of some distant causes like supporting Ukraine, for example. So it's a very dangerous situation. And of course, a society that is better equipped to support its international commitments, it's only a society that is cohesive and that it doesn't feel abandoned by its own elites. So in this sense, I think in Europe, it should be a priority, effective and urgent measures to redistribute wealth in order to restore the trust of citizens. So in this sense, the help that European countries can provide to Ukraine also depends on their capacity to resolve their own internal crisis of legitimacy. But I must repeat it again and again, reiterating what was already said. The aid that truly matters for Ukraine is military aid. We cannot put this question aside. We cannot say, oh, we help Ukraine, but we are against the military aid. It doesn't work like that, because it's the most crucial condition for Ukrainian survival as a society, as well as for each of the members of this society. And I think the real question now, also particularly for the left, is, does it have a concrete plan or program or idea how to address these urgent challenges that we all face? And as I was watching a lot of European Parliament debates and the national debates, there are left-wing and ecological critics of this plan of European rearmament. And they are totally right when they say that, okay, we're talking about rearmament, but neither the ecological crisis nor systemic inequality has disappeared. These are the problems that persist. And indeed, these are, especially the ecological crisis, it's an existential threat to all of us that should be and should remain at our focus. But there is a crucial thing that they often ignore and that should never be ignored in my opinion. And the Ukrainians know it very well, that okay, we also care about human rights and environment and equality, but we also know that neither human life nor environment can be protected if your state falls within the so-called zone of interest of some autocratic imperial powers like Russia, China, and now the United States are also becoming such a power. In this, if you are becoming a vassal state of such autocratic powers, you can just forget about all the struggles for justice, ecology, and liberties that we all need so much. Because in a world that is dominated by this kind of great power, unchecked great power politics, progressive organizations and figures and their values are quickly pushed to the margins. First, they are pushed to the margins politically, then physically. And actually, we see it right before our eyes in the US, how in the period of a few weeks or even days, the society can be paralyzed, and most of its progressive elements are pushed to the margins. But of course, our hope is that they will resist. So abstract slogans about, let's abolish war everybody would like to abolish war, but if you were just advancing these abstract slogans, it reveals, I think, not only the lack of practical solutions, but also the lack of will to take responsibility, to engage in very difficult work of governance, of strategy, of actually proposing solutions. And those political organizations that are just refusing to confront the reality, that we now face, they become not actors, but just observers. They comment about the events, but they are not shaping the events. And if in doing so, they actually abandon politics and they surrender these tasks of security and defense, of articulating the security and defense with social security and social equality. They surrender these tasks to those they ideologically oppose, to the right, conservative right and far right, who have the advantage to propose easy solutions. These are bad solutions, but these are easy solutions. So I think we should seriously think about the fact that we are confronted with a false choice. The choice between social justice and security, as Alexander said, it's a false choice. It's totally possible, not just possible, but necessary to articulate and to have both. And as I said, of course, security should never be paid by cutting pensions or healthcare. So if we want not just to be observers, we must push for tax justice. We must push for closing all the numerous loopholes that allow corporations to avoid paying taxes. We also must crack down on offshore tax havens that exist inside Europe and prosper during the crisis. So I think instead also of each state talking about increasing its own military budget, we should above all focus on strengthening European collective security mechanism and coordination, which is lacking. So, and also an important thing that I wouldn't have time to develop, but that security energy is also part of military security. Energy security must be considered part of the military strategy. Because if we continue to rely on the fossil fuels of the authoritarian and fascist regimes, we will be continuously blackmailed by these regimes. We will surrender our sovereignty to those who control the energy supplies. And of course, as a Ukrainian, I think the best solution for us and the quick solution for us, because we need quick solutions. Ukrainians are resistance, but they are humans. They are not robots, and they cannot be in the trenches for years and years. So we must push for the confiscation of Russian assets and use them to fund Ukraine's defense, and it would hold Russia accountable, financially accountable for its war crimes, and would also allow to avoid additional burdens on European citizens. So, and the last thing I wanted to say, if we talk about the bankruptcy of neoliberal economy when it comes to security, we should keep in mind the example of Ukraine, because it is more and more evident that Ukrainian government has created an impasse for itself because it's trying to defend itself in a war against an imperialist power while clinging to the fantasy of neoliberal economy. They are trying to combine the both, and these are the things that are mutually incompatible. So because this neoliberal economy is based on individualistic social imaginary, on deregulated economies, and it is simply not adapted to the demands of defense, because defense requires solidarity at all levels of the society. What Ukrainian government does, it is undermining this really existing solidarity by its stupid laws of deregulation of labor and etc. So they're destroying the trust that people have in the state. And so but just to be clear, it's not just that Ukraine is somehow a state that deserves no support, etc. This is a trap that is not unique to Ukraine. Any state, any Western neoliberal state that will be confronted with military aggression, if it is pursuing the same strategy as Ukrainian government, they would face the same problems and the same limits. And I think the example of Ukraine should make clear that the need for social and economic model that prioritizes equality, justice, social cohesion, it is not just an ideal, but it's a very condition for the survival of the societies in current circumstances. And unfortunately, these current circumstances is that military aggressions are set to multiply. So I will finish here. And thank you very much again for your interest and your patience. Thank you.